Hello awesome people, I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at the 96-page novella in this Lean Times in Lankhmar collection. It's called The Adept's Gambit. It takes place in Earth. It's set in Tyre and has some characters from Earth as well. Fafhrd and Gray Mouser were sent there in the last short story, which if you recall was just connective tissue between the two short stories that have probably been published previously. I only gave it a 6 because it didn't really have a plot. It just connected them from the end of When the Sea King's Away to this, The Adept's Gambit. I've read this over the last 3 nights. It's about an hour each of them, so it took me about 3 days for me to knock out this novella. I did 32 pages each night to knock out this 95-page short story, or novella really more. It was fun. I enjoyed it. As a reminder, this series, and I'll link you to this second collection in the series, was started getting published in 1939 with a short story called Two Sought Adventure. And it was also the first short story published by Fritz Leiber, one of the most awarded people with a ton of Hugo Awards in the science fiction genre. This series actually will win some Hugos too. He'll also win Stoker for his horror stuff too. And then he died in 1992, and he was publishing every decade from the 30s to the 90s. And then that's a key part of the motivation of my passion, if you'll recall. The title of his channel is a quote by a French philosopher named Jacques Joubert, who said that the worst thing about new books was that they kept us from reading the old ones. And so this guy who died decades ago and published from the 30s to the 90s is definitely somebody who's a passion of mine. In addition to that, this guy was very, very influential, and this series was very, very influential too. So what do I think about this novella? Well, it's probably a little bit too long. It has a lot of description in some places, but that's fine because it's world building. But it has a lot of conversation too. About 40% of this novel actually is somebody telling you about their backstory. A third character, who's a key character in the plot, tells this backstory for like the last 40% of the book, rather than having like a lot of plot. And it feels like, it just doesn't read well. Going back and rereading this for a second time for you folks, for this channel. Also, it doesn't. There's probably there are also some combat scenes and some scenes where they acquire objects early in this novella where it doesn't have a lot of details in it. And I'm like, it'll basically skip past all these major plot points early on that they're doing as basically a quest. And then it's got way too much description about this third character's backstory. So I feel like if he had changed that and kept it the same length, 96 pages long, but had switched it so that the backstory was a lot shorter and doesn't take up like 40% of this book, it's a conversation between characters, as well as, having a fleshed out combat scenes and detailed stuff, and the thieves and the thieveries and stuff like that, that are much more detailed than just a quick little chapter. I think early on, I think that this would have been a much stronger novella for you folks. So I'm only giving this a 7 out of 10, even though this guy is a decorated guy who's won a lot of awards. But going back and rereading this for a second time, it was fine. I'm definitely glad I did so, but it's not the best in this collection. But it's fine, and I definitely enjoyed it, and I would recommend it moving forward. If somebody, after me publishing decades later, somebody said this is 7 out of 10, I would be super happy, right? So I'm sure you guys would be fine too with that too. Anyway, so again, I keep my reviews spoiler free, so I'm not doing a deep dive into it with the spoilers and stuff. But if you want to talk about that in the comments below, we can. I talked earlier about how influential Fritz Leiber is with modern day fantasy. So let's talk a little bit more about that. And I've talked about it a little bit more. It's a reason why you might, if you're reading a modern fantasy work, if there's a thieves code in it with thieves characters that are doing typical thieves things, then this is coming from this short story series and novella series from Fritz Leiber, because of how these characters and the thieves guilds that he describes are so forth are definitely just taken whole cloth from into modern fantasy. So it's hugely influential. Also, the big giant seedy city with Horror Street and the Plaza of Dark Delights and things like that, and this seedy giant city are also a key concept that also is seen pretty commonly in modern fantasy stuff too. Not just fantasy works like in fiction, that you read, but comics and video games and role-playing games and stuff like that too. Also, while on the conversation about role-playing games, there was in the 1979 edition of the first edition of Dungeon Master's Guide, Guy, the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons, the first role-playing game, said that this was one of the most influential works, where he got his ideas from the games in an appendix called Appendix N, so that's also key. Also in the 80s, there's a game, a role-playing game in Dungeons and Dragons that's set in this campaign, so you can actually play in the world for you folks. So it's definitely had a massive impact on modern fantasy, in particular this series. He's also has some other things that we've read and reviewed for you folks too. He has a short story in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, according to the Science Fiction Writers of America, that put it into a collection of the Hall of Fame stories that they will redeem, which I've reviewed for him. Also, I talked about him doing Stoker stuff in horror genre too. I reviewed a horror short story that's in the Cthulhu mythos, since I take October aside to talk about the Cthulhu mythos. Speaking of the Cthulhu mythos, he also was an acolyte of H.P. Lovecraft, and I wrote back and forth with him. Although H.P. Lovecraft would die a couple of years before his first publication in 1937, which his first publication was Two-Sided Adventure, which I've reviewed for you, in 1939. So there you are. That's my review of Adept's Gambit. I won't take too much of your time. It's pretty precious. Did you enjoy it? Did you agree with my 7 out of 10? If you want to talk about spoilers or comments, let's do it. If you enjoyed this, why not hit that subscribe button? There should be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.